Yo, what is going on, guys? Dr. Ethan Turner here with the Fantasy Headliners, and it's time for your Week 8 Injury Update show. This is the show where I go through every single NFL matchup and tell you all the injuries that you guys need to know for your fantasy teams. This show is brought to you by our boys over at Fantrax. Make sure you download the Fantrax app. Let them know that the Headliners sent you. If you're into some fantasy college basketball, that sounds like something I'd be into, make sure you download the Fantrax app. It is the place to play fantasy on your phone. I love their setup. I think that it's an awesome app. It's very easy to use. Once you get the hang of it, I love that it's no frills. It's just straight up fantasy sports, and that's how I like my fantasy sports. But let's get into it. Week 8 Injury Update show. Let's go. All right, guys, sadly, I do have to start this show with not one, but two moment of silences. Week 7 was brutal to our fantasy teams, and nothing hurt more than running back Breece Hall for the Jets, torn ACL, done for the season. Really thought he was on to something special as a rookie, but we're going to have to wait until next year to see that. Breece Hall done for the year, ACL tear. And then we got a guy we've talked about a few weeks in a row here now. It finally happened. Big one here. J.C. Jackson, cornerback 1 for the Chargers, goes down with a patella tendon rupture. That's about a 9-month recovery. He is also done for the year. Just brutal luck for the Chargers. They are one of those teams that are just getting hammered by injuries right now. But let's take a quick moment of silence for these two guys. Absolute warriors, playing for our fantasy teams, but they are done for the year due to injury. Sad. It really is sad. But the show must go on. Let's go into my Week 7 recap. How did I do? You guys know the drill. Every single week, I go through and tell you how I did last week so that you know that I'm keeping and holding myself accountable week to week. Last week, not my best week on in-out calls, 84% on the week, still 87% on the year, but I did have some misses. DeAndre Swift, Shaq Leonard, Russell Wilson, all surprising sits last week. I did not think that those guys were going to sit last week, but they did. And then we had a few guys that I thought would sit that ended up playing: Hunter Renfrow, Tyler Lockett, Keenan Allen. Expected all three of those guys to sit. None of them scored over 8 half PPR points last week. On the year so far, over 90% of the time when I expect a player to sit and they end up playing, they fail to score more than 10 half PPR points. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at guys that I say are going to sit and they end up playing. That is a risky start for your fantasy team. The 49ers safety, Talanoa Hufanga, was the cornerback 39 on the week, but did have an interception, and he did play. So I didn't expect him to come back and play. He ended up playing, did have an interception. Startable week for a cornerback, but still, cornerback 39 on the week, not amazing by any stretch. Now, I did have some hits last week. It wasn't all misses, okay? My prize pick play of the week hit for the third week in a row. We got Mike Evans going over 65.5 receiving yards. Would have hit that on the very first drive of the game had he not dropped a 75-yard touchdown. I expected him a big bounce back week. Still tied for wide receiver 13 on the week in half PPR, but man, if he'd have caught that touchdown, you want to talk about a monster week. He should have had it. I called it, but he didn't catch it, so we're going to settle for wide receiver 13 on the week. We got T. Higgins finally coming back, being fantasy relevant again. Said he's going to be a wide receiver 2 on the week. Finishes wide receiver 22 on the week. Technically a wide receiver 2. 11.8 half PPR points. That is a solid week. We will take it. Dak Prescott coming back off of his injury. Said he was probably more of a QB2 last week. Did finish as QB 18 on the week, right in the middle of that QB2 spot. Mac Jones. I said and warned you guys that he was probably going to play, but I didn't expect Bailey Zapp to go away. And guess what? Mac Jones ended up splitting time with Bailey Zapp. Zappy got the touchdown. Neither one of them really had a great fantasy day, but Zappy did finish with more fantasy points than Mac Jones. Who knows what's going to happen with the Patriots this week, but I know one thing that I do trust Ramondre Stevenson, just like last week, even though Damian Harris is back, Ramondre Stevenson has taken over that role. He finishes the RB11 on the week in half PPR, even though Damian Harris did play and was not really looking to be much limited in terms of his production. So those are my hits and misses. I hope you guys enjoyed that, but let's get into our matchups of week 8. All right, guys, so the Chiefs and Chargers are on a bye this week. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about players that are not going to play each and every week because we got so many guys to go through. But if there's somebody you really want to know about, let me know in the comments down below. I normally also don't talk about Thursday Night Football, but I have to talk about how bad that game went for those two teams. Ravens dealing with a ton of injuries on the offensive side. Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, Gus Edwards, all leaving with injuries in the game last night. Running back J.K. Dobbins was placed on IR last weekend after needing surgery on the same knee he tore his ACL in last year. He's out for at least 4 weeks, but may get shut down for the year if things don't go well with this recovery. He is and has been an injury risk all year. I tried to warn you guys before the season started. If you bought the world famous Fantasy Headliners Draft Guide, you would have known that I was totally off of J.K. Dobbins, and it sounds like Gus Edwards may have been a guy that you should have been off on as well. He is already dealing with that hamstring injury. Don't trust guys coming off ACL tears. It is just the odds are against you. The problem is that the Ravens weren't the only team that had major injury bad luck last night. The Bucs star pass rusher Shaq Barrett goes down with probably the most serious injury of the week, what is believed to be an Achilles rupture. Absolutely brutal game for the Bucs. The Bucs are in a bad place. Will we see Tom Brady retire in the middle of the season? I don't think so, but it's fun to speculate. At this point, the Bucs are just an absolute train wreck. Moving on to the Broncos and the Jags. Broncos quarterback Russell Wilson is annoying all of his team on the plane. He's trying to get better, trying to improve from this hamstring/lat strain that he's been dealing with all year. Sounds like he's practicing. Does look like he is going to play. He is just an odd duck, just a weird guy, but it does look like he is going to return this week. Jags, luckily for them, no major injuries heading into this week. Jamal Agnew's dealing with a little bit of something. Doesn't look like he will play, but nothing major to talk about from a fantasy perspective. Heading over to the Panthers at the Falcons. Panthers dealing with an injury at the running back position, traded CMC, his backup, and now what should have been the starting running back, Chuba Hubbard, dealing with an ankle sprain. Injury took him out of last week's game, allowed D'Onta Foreman to absolutely feast. I feel like D'Onta Foreman is in for a great week this week. Doesn't look like Chuba Hubbard is going to be able to play. And, D'Onta Foreman, if you need a guy as an RB2, I like it. I like it as an RB2 this week against a Falcons defense that couldn't do anything last week. Cornerback 1, AJ Terrell, dealing with a hamstring strain. Terrell played last week, but did leave that game. And after he left, man, the Bengals absolutely shredded this Falcons defense. I think the Panthers could do the same. I don't think AJ Terrell's coming back this week. I like DJ Moore in a matchup that he could capitalize on with a weak secondary and no CMC. Now, let's see DJ Moore return to fantasy relevance week after week. Going over to the Bears and the Cowboys. Bears don't really have anything to talk about, but the Cowboys did have an issue at running back. Ezekiel Elliott, dealing with a knee sprain, played through this injury, but it looks like the swelling got worse as the week got on. Unlikely for Zeke Elliott to play. Tony Pollard going to step into a monster workload this week. Tight end Dalton Schultz also dealing with that PCL sprain. Schultz has been active last few weeks. He's been one of those guys you're just holding your breath every time he touches the ball. There's not much to say about this other than it needs more time to heal. He's getting limited practice sessions in. I do think he's going to play. I think you still have to start him because of the volume, but just know he is not at 100% and might not be for a while. Heading to the Dolphins at the Lions. Dolphins dealing with quite a few different things that we need to be paying attention to. First up, we got cornerback Xavier Howard. He's been dealing with a groin strain. Howard has missed a few games with this injury, but did start practicing in limited fashion this week. Sounds like he is on track to play this week. Not good for the Lions wide receivers, but the Dolphins dealing with some injuries at their wide receiver ranks. We got Jalen Waddle dealing with that shoulder sprain he's had for a few weeks now. He's been able to play through and actually has played pretty well the last few weeks, and I'm gonna double down on this. I think that Jalen Waddle is in for another big week. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 2, but I think that this is the week for Jalen Waddle. I'm gonna go out on a limb and just say Jalen Waddle, he's gonna have a nice game this week. I'm feeling it in my bones. He is my Prize Pick play of the week. Head on over to Prize Pick, use the code Headliners, get a $100 match on your first deposit. Once you do that, throw a little money on Jalen Waddle going over 65.5 yards this week. Running back Raheem Mostert dealing with a knee injury. Keep an eye on this situation because we know that Raheem Mostert has a history of knee issues in the past. He was downgraded to a limited practice on Thursday. We never like to see that because he was a full practice on Wednesday. And I think there's still a good chance he plays, but just knowing he has this history, knowing that his coach knows he has this history, there is a chance that they are really cautious with Raheem Mostert. He could be a late sit that nobody's expecting. So just keep an eye on it. Hopefully we'll get good reports heading into the weekend. Make sure you're checking out the live shows this weekend for updates on Raheem Mostert. Now the Lions, they've got some issues on their offensive end. Amon-Ra St. Brown came back and immediately got concussed, or did he? This is where the new concussion rules are going to play a huge factor in guys playing week to week, and there's just not really much we can do about it. There's some speculation that Amon-Ra St. Brown did not have a concussion and that he got pulled due to the new rule that any unsteadiness is an automatic pull for concussion symptoms. We're seeing that this might not be a great rule. They might have to continue tweaking this, but somebody somewhere saw that he was not looking steady, had some symptoms, had to pull him. He is technically in concussion protocol, even though the team has said basically he didn't have a concussion. Who knows? There's no way for me to tell you for sure, but all I know is he got pulled, but he is on track to play this week. Another guy that a lot of fantasy owners are waiting to get back, and that's DeAndre Swift. He is dealing with the shoulder sprain that kept him out heading into the bye week. I thought he was going to come back last week. He didn't. Team is opting to get him back to full health. Surprising that they sat him, yes, but full practices all week this week. Sounds like he is back. I hope. It sounds like he's back, but, I've been fooled before. And then wide receiver Josh Reynolds dealing with a knee sprain. Practiced for the first time in a few weeks on Thursday. I still think there's a chance that he sits in this game. I'm not playing him in fantasy if he plays, but if he plays, a little bit of a damper for the pass game as a whole, just because there's just more options. Maybe a little bit of a bump for Jared Goff, who has been just horrible the last 2 weeks. Moving to the Cardinals and the Vikings. Cardinals running back James Conner dealing with that rib injury. He has practiced in a limited fashion all week. Sounds like he's on track to play, but he's only an RB3 for me. I think that Eno Benjamin still gets worked in, and I think if Eno Benjamin is getting work, I just don't see how James Conner can give you a really solid fantasy day unless he's scoring multiple touchdowns. The Cardinals also dealing with kicker problems. Matt Prater dealing with a hip strain. He's been limited in practice this week. It does seem like he's on track to play, but I just don't trust kickers dealing with hip injuries. It just seems like they have accuracy issues when their hip is hurting them. So he is a sit for me, even if you want to. And the Vikings don't really have any injuries to speak of. So we're just going to keep moving on. Head into the Raiders at the Saints. Wide receiver Davante Adams dealing with an illness. Sounds like he has a severe case of the flu. He is questionable to play in this game. Is going to be a game time decision. Anytime we see illness, there's just no way for me to know. I mean, he could be fine or he could be, absolutely miserable on game day. It just depends on how he feels that morning. If he can shake it by Sunday, a lot of players do end up shaking this type of stuff by Sunday. You still have to be able, you have to start Davante Adams. He's just too good to sit. Running back Josh Jacobs dealing with a foot injury. Hopefully this is just some soreness and just being, over cautious with the running back, trying to limit what is right now one of the only true bell cow running backs that we have in the NFL right now, Josh Jacobs. Who would have guessed that would happen? So much for the running back dead zone that apparently Josh Jacobs was a part of. Shout out to Jake. If you looked at our preseason videos, Jake did a full video on why the running back dead zone was a total farce, and anybody who said it is missing out on Josh Jacobs. So hopefully you watched that video, took some advice from my boy Jake. But it sounds like Josh Jacobs is going to be able to play. Just be aware of it. Josh Jacobs does have a history of having injuries and breaking down over time when he gets full workload. So we're just keeping an eye on it. Doesn't sound like it's too serious, but we are keeping an eye on it, and we don't like foot injuries. We don't like them. Tight end Darren Waller dealing with a hamstring strain. Not practicing last week, or not after not playing last week, that is, and not practicing. Waller is practicing this week, but still heading towards a game time decision tag with too limited practice. I think he's still startable in fantasy if he plays, but only because tight end, total wasteland. There's no good options at tight end. Don't be surprised if he isn't an elite tight end one, even if he's playing. You might end up with a dud, but here's the deal. You're probably going to end up with a dud anyway, unless you have a really solid backup at tight end. And if you have a solid backup, I recommend you play them over Darren Waller this week, just because I don't trust him first week back after this injury. Saints got a lot of issues going on the offensive end and defensive side. Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, both those guys dealing with the injuries that they've had for weeks now. Neither one of them is likely to play. Cornerback Marshawn Lattimore dealing with an abdominal injury. He hasn't played in a while, also not likely to play. But perhaps the most interesting injury update of the week, Jameis Winston dealing with back and ankle injuries. Reportedly tore his peroneal tendon in his ankle earlier this year. So we got a little bit more update on what the ankle injury was. But that's not the big news here. The big news is that it doesn't matter that Jameis Winston is practicing in full. He has been publicly benched by his team. They are going with Andy Dalton. Just absolutely savage move by the Saints. Going to the Patriots at the Jets. Patriots, not really anything to speak of. Jets, only one guy I'm worried about outside of Breece Hall being done for the year. That really sucks. But wide receiver Corey Davis dealing with a knee sprain. Hasn't practiced yet this week. Doesn't look like he is going to play. Garrett Wilson, maybe the only real pass catcher left in this offense. Maybe Michael Carter. Maybe they work in James Robinson a little bit. James Robinson, not exactly an explosive pass catcher, but could be used in the passing game. I think it's going to be Michael Carter. I think it's going to be Garrett Wilson, but I think the team is going to be hurting to try to beat a really not great Patriots team. So I just don't love where the offense is going. No Corey Davis, now no Breece Hall. Breece Hall was really carrying that offense. So we'll see what happens with the Jets, but just know that Elijah Moore, 2 catches, would we take it? I feel like we would. I mean, you got to showcase him at some point if he wants traded. Use him. Show that he's worth something, because right now nobody's trading for a guy that clearly does not want to be there. Heading over to the Steelers at the Eagles. Steelers don't really have a whole lot going on from an injury perspective, but D-end TJ Watt, big issue here. He's dealing with the pec strain and knee surgery that he had while he was recovering from his pec strain. He was designated to return from IR and does have an outside chance of playing this week. Obviously, huge bump for the Steelers defense if TJ Watt's playing, one of the best defenders in the world right now. If he's playing, it makes a big difference for the Steelers, whose defense looked incredible with him playing earlier in the season. And they're going up against an Eagles team that nothing really major to speak of. The Eagles are healthy. They're winning games. This is a long shot win for the Steelers, but hey, if TJ Watt is back, at least we got something to watch from the Steelers' perspective. Moving over to the Titans and the Texans. Titans quarterback Ryan Tannehill is dealing with an ankle sprain. Missed one play on Sunday, but we have seen this in the past. Adrenaline gets these guys all pumped up. They can play through the ankle injury during the injury. They have the injury and then they play through it. Their, energy's high, and then they go home, and then the ankle starts to swell, and then the pain really sets in, and then it's not moving well, and then it hurts to walk, and then all of a sudden they're missing multiple games. And that looks like what is happening with Ryan Tannehill. Did get a limited session in, but if he's not healthy enough to play, could we see Malik Willis? Hey, personally, I want to see Malik Willis get a shot. I want to see what this kid has. Elite athlete. If he is available and you're really desperate for a quarterback, I'm not afraid to throw Malik Willis in. He's one of those guys that from a running perspective gives you a ton of upside, a really safe floor. If he is named the starter, I would not be afraid to start him as a QB2, but it does sound like Ryan Tannehill is really pushing hard to play. The Texans don't have a lot going on from an injury perspective, but wide receiver Nico Collins dealing with a groin strain, not practicing, doesn't look like he's going to play. Brandon Cooks should be in line for a decent workload if the team doesn't sit him on purpose if they're trying to trade him at the trade deadline. So just kind of be aware that Brandon Cooks is on the block. The team could opt to sit him so he doesn't get injured, even though he is in a good matchup here with the Texans, with Nico Collins most likely sitting. Moving over to Washington at the Colts. Washington wide receiver Jahan Dotson's got that hamstring strain that he re-injured a few weeks ago. Still not practicing. Doesn't look like he's going to play. The Colts, we have another quarterback downgrade. Can you believe this? 2 quarterbacks getting publicly shamed by their teams. We do this all the time as fantasy players, but it's weird to see a team just say, hey, we're moving in a different direction. Matt Ryan, grade 2 shoulder sprain. So he is injured, but he's already been ruled out for the week. But worse than that, the teams basically said, hey, we don't want you to start anymore. We're going to move over to Sam Ehlinger. He's going to be the starter now. You're chopped liver. You're totally washed. We don't want a part of this anymore. Nick Foles is going to be the backup. And if you come back, probably not going to be a starter anyway. Matt Ryan probably should ask for a trade at this point. The team wanted him, and then now he is just getting thrown away like Andy threw away. God, I can't remember his name. This is terrible. Woody in the box. I don't want to play with you anymore. That is what the Colts are doing to Matt Ryan right now. D lineman Kwity Paye has this ankle injury. He can't shake, not practicing. Doesn't look like he's going to play. Shaq Leonard, one of my few misses last week, dealing with a back. He had back surgery in the offseason, had a concussion, returned to full practices this week. I've been fooled on him, so I'm going to say he's still a game time decision, but I do think he returns this week. Heading over to the 49ers at the Rams, wide receiver Deebo Samuel dealing with a hamstring strain. This one is, I feel like, underreported. Not enough people talking about this Deebo Samuel injury. He has had issues with soft tissue injuries in the past. It looks like he's got another one now. If I had to make an educated guess right now, I don't think Deebo Samuel is going to play with this hamstring injury. He has not practiced. If he doesn't practice on Friday, probably a pretty good chance he's not playing. Fullback Kyle Juszczyk dealing with a finger injury. He's not practicing, not expecting him to play. So the question is who's going to catch passes for the 49ers? Huge games possible from George Kittle. And do we see a fully unleashed CMC this week? I would love to see it against a Rams team that is struggling at the running back position. Running back Cam Akers, he is dealing with hurt, upset feelings right now. The team doesn't he doesn't feel like the team loves him anymore. He isn't practicing with the team, and I think he might be a cut candidate if he isn't traded because it seems like this is an irreparable relationship. The team has said, hey, we don't think you have it anymore. Cam Akers is upset about that. And honestly, his feelings are probably hurt because I was just mean to everyone that drafted him when I told them not to. So I'm not really sorry about that. If you drafted Cam Akers, this is what happens, man. When you don't listen, sometimes you get absolutely smacked. And I'm just going to take a little walk around my victory lane here. Running back Darrell Henderson dealing with an illness. Again, practicing in limited fashion. Illness, almost impossible to tell what's going on with these guys. I think he plays. Don't love him against the 49ers, though. RB3 for me this week based purely on the volume that he is going to get. Moving on to the Giants at the Seahawks. Giants tight end Daniel Bellinger, who was a revelation for the tight end position as a rookie, has a broken eye socket. Really strange to see a player getting carted off for an eye injury, but this is a serious one. I don't expect Bellinger to be back for a few weeks, maybe even longer as this eye heals. I haven't heard anything about him needing surgery on that. It sounds like they're going to let it heal and hopefully not need surgery, but we don't know for sure. Seahawks wide receiver DK Metcalf's dealing with a tendon strain. Really could have been way, way worse based on the video. I was worried that he had a meniscus or an ACL injury, but it sounds like it's just the patella tendon strain. Avoided the major injury, but still not likely to play this week. It's one of those things that doesn't heal very quickly. I just don't think that DK Metcalf is going to be ready this week. Plan to be without him. Heading over to the Packers at the Bills, this could get really, really ugly. The Packers dealing with all sorts of injuries on the offensive side. Allen Lazard's got a shoulder sprain, not practicing, doesn't look like he's going to play, and he's playing late on Sunday night. So do you really want to wait and then find out that he gets sat right at the end? I'm just finding a replacement right now for Allen Lazard. Wide receiver Sammy Watkins, Christian Watson, both dealing with hamstring injuries. Both have been limited Wednesday and Thursday. I expect both those guys to play, so good news for Aaron Rodgers there. The bad news is offensive tackle David Bakhtiari, coming back from that ACL tear last year, has been practicing the last week, but then didn't play last week. So he was practicing, then got downgraded, didn't play. This week, he practiced on Wednesday, then got downgraded again on Thursday. So I think the team is just falling apart. I think the Bills could absolutely blow them out. And the Bills don't really have anything to speak of from an injury perspective, at least nothing that's going to affect us from a fantasy impact here. Last up here, we got Monday Night Football, Bengals at the Browns. Bengals wide receiver Jamar Chase, probably the biggest injury of the week, dealing with a hip fracture of some sort. I'm speculating it's an avulsion fracture based on the hip flexor strain that he's had for multiple weeks now. I did do a full video on Jamar Chase on that injury, so if you didn't see that, make sure you go check out that video. Occasionally, when something big happens, I will drop an injury update video exclusive for one player because I want you guys to know the info as quickly as possible. So if you have any questions, go watch that video and then ask them in the comments down below. Just know Jamar Chase out this week, potentially heading to IR for a while. Honestly, in redraft, I might be looking to move him for somebody that I can, play, especially if my team is losing right now. Don't be afraid to shop Jamar Chase to somebody that might possibly get to use him late in the year if it can get you somebody that is solid that can play week to week, because it doesn't look like he's going to play in the next month. And if you're already hurting, you need to make up the points somehow. You might have to move on from Jamar Chase. Last up, we got the Browns here. Tight end David Njoku's got a high ankle sprain. He's going to be out for about 3 to 6 weeks. Cornerback Denzel Ward dealing with a concussion, still not practicing after nearly 3 weeks due to a concussion. Very, very concerned for Denzel Ward's health. And then the Browns just across the board on defense had quite a few guys not practicing on Thursday, but they play on Monday. So a lot of these guys could still play. They have been playing, but they're not practicing right now. Jadeveon Clowney, Myles Garrett, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and then we got Greedy Williams. The defense is still exploitable even without Jamar Chase. I like Hayden Hurst as a low-end tight end 1 this week, especially if JOK misses this game, because he would be who would be in charge of keeping tabs on the tight end. So Hayden Hurst, if JOK misses, definitely liking him as a tight end 1 this week. So that's it, guys. Week 8 injury update show in the books. Is there anybody I missed? Let me know in the comments down below. And hey, do me a favor. Go ahead and subscribe to the Fantasy Headliners. Make sure you turn on the notifications so that you get updates anytime I'm talking about some injuries, so that you guys can keep ahead of your fantasy league mates. We are here to help you at the Fantasy Headliners. We want you guys to succeed, and we want you guys to win fantasy championships this year. So turn on those notifications so you always know when the Fantasy Headliners are dropping new content. Special thanks to our sponsors over at PrizePicks, Fantrax. Make sure you download the apps, use the code Headliners, and if you're looking for a little special something for yourself, maybe you got a little special somebody you want to be getting a Christmas present for, ladies. Fantasy Headliners have partnered with our boys over at Manscaped. Use the code Headliners, 20% off and free shipping at checkout. But that's all I got for you guys this week. Injury update show in the books. The doc is out.